Barkeep, a man could die of thirst in this pub. Somebody buy me a pint, please.
Hello out there, everybody, and all ships at sea. Skip Healy here from beautiful Wohlen, Switzerland, as the sun is setting, which is also a beautiful tune. I have to play that one for you sometime. The Sunset from Cathal McConnell, that's another great tune. We'll get around to that one of these days. But today, we're going to visit, once again, beautiful West Clare. We're going to go to a town just across the river from a well-known place called Lahinch, but the town we're going to be visiting right now is called Ennistymon, and this tune is called The Humours of Ennistymon. Now, Ennistymon itself is kind of a market town, I guess you could say. Lots of shops, lots of shopping. It's been that way for quite a while. There's a river that comes through the town called Ina, depending, I'm not quite sure on the pronunciation. I think it was I-N-A-G-H is the spelling of it. I learned this tune from a man that it really was just my honor to meet and share the last 10 or so years of his life with. A wonderful old musician. All of you longtime listeners to the Series 1 and Series 2 of Tunes from the Shop heard me mention this guy a lot. His name was Phil Malachny. Way back in the day, he played piccolo, he played flute. I have one of his old flutes up on the wall here behind me. I'm getting an appreciation with the arthritis I have in my hands and all of this osteo stuff going on up here. He had that in all of his fingers, really bent up old farmer hands, you know, so I built a whistle for him, and I offset the tone holes in a pattern that they would fall right under his fingers, and he could play the bejesus out of that thing. He was a lovely singer as well. Phil was the master of the three-part jigs, but today we just have a simple, great session tune, this Humours of Ennistymon. Ennistymon also borders a beautiful place to visit if you're in Ireland called the Burren. Kind of a, I don't want to say a nature reserve exactly, but it's a very open air. It's just freaking beautiful. If you're in Ireland and looking for someplace to go, I have a buddy there on a motorcycle right now. You know who you are. I know you're watching this video. Go to the Burren. You'll love it. So, here we go. The Humours of Ennistymon. a set of jigs with that, you will have everybody in the room dancing. That is a phenomenal tune for me to end a set of 3 jigs with. You start with a fairly bright jig to begin with. Go to, if you're in D, say start with a jig in D, Tripping Up the Stairs, My Darling Asleep, any kind of tune like that. Then go into a little bit of a minor sounding jig, some kind of A minor jig, Mist on the Mountain, or you name it. Any generic A minor jig. And then you go into that tune on the end. You're going to blow up whatever room you're in, I promise you. So let's take a little look at this tune. Very, very simple, very basic kind of G major jig. Really falls, I think it might have been written by a flute player. It fits the flute so well. A lot of times, I always think, you know, in traditional music, unlike classical music, a lot of classical composers or arrangers do their work on a piano, which is a kind of a neutral instrument. It's a keyboard, you know. But in folk music, most of the time, the composer creates his tune or her tune on the instrument that they play. And because they play instrument X, it fits that instrument especially well. The mechanics of the instrument or the style of playing the instrument. And that is such a flute tune. It just fits and feels so good on the flute. You just play it effortlessly. So me, it kind of feels like a tune that may have been composed by a flute player once upon a time. Let's break it down a little bit. Again, G major. So we're going to be playing C naturals, and where you can, again, I know I push this a lot, but I suggest this fingering 2, 4, 5, 6. It's a great fingering to get a strong C natural on the flute. And again, I apologize about this little ugliness on my nose here, but I had a little skin cancer removed a couple of days ago, so we're in the stages of healing from that right now. But so there's a couple of ways I showed you there of handling that beginning. You can play, you can do the little fake C sharp if you want. You can leave a couple of fingers down on the right hand. It makes not quite as bright a C that way because you're starting to shade towards the famous C natural. You can bring everything up if you want, but that starts sounding a little bright. So you're playing a lot through a C natural there. Okay, so that's the little bridge area I talk about with these. A lot of these old tunes, it'll start with a theme for the first couple of measures. You get a little bridge that carries you back to that opening theme, and then you have measures 7 and 8 at the end of the line. This is a very, very well-established formula for either old traditional tunes or new tunes that were written in a traditional style. Okay? The other way of handling that, instead of with whatever kind of faux C you want to play in there, you can play a long D in there with a pulse at the end. So you're playing basically a D for 3 beats, and you're putting a pulse on the third of those beats. This one was a little tricky. The end of this, it has this move a few times. It has two main moves in this tune. The first one we looked at a second ago, playing through that C natural. That same lick comes up in the second half, as does this one. You go down to a G, back up to the B, down to the G again. That's really important to get that, because a lot of G jigs end with some variant of that. This is not that. And this is the spice that makes this cool so tuned. This tune so, makes it so tuned. There you go. New phrase, put that on a t-shirt. That's what makes this tune so cool. There's a couple little moves, the one rolling around the C there, a little bit of technique involved in that. You got to work on that a little bit. This lick on the end here, you just have to remember it's G back up to B, down to G, which is a very nice little turn at the end of the line. Okay, first half. Not bad, not complicated. Two little things to remember in there. I know you can do it. I got faith in you. Second half, very rolly, like the falls in a Steinman. Now there's a little variation on the repeat of the second half. I didn't play it for you there. I wanted to play it the normal way 2 times through. Here's the little variation at the end. I'll play the full second half, but this will be the repeat of the second half. And save this for the repeat. Don't play it both times in the second half, because you lose the shock value of the little variation. So all these cool little moves, sometimes you put them in your back pocket and you save it for the last time through the tune to just give it a little bit more of a boost, a little charge at the end of the tune. So here's a little bonus. There's the full second half. And that's why I play the full second half, so I get the full flow of the tune so I don't mess up the part I'm trying to show you. Ha! But I'm going to leave that in the video because it's good to see everybody making mistakes. Mistakes are how we learn. Be proud of your mistakes. Make them loud. Make them glorious. Most of the time, if you believe what you're playing is right, the people listening to you will think it's right. The two most important notes, first note and the last note. First note's the first note they hear. Last note's the last note they hear. You play a beautiful last note, covers up a lot of sins that may go on during the tune. I used to do a lot of construction work, some woodworking and things, and there's an old saying in the carpenter trade, little putty, little paint makes a carpenter what he ain't. A good last note will get you out of a lot of problems. Okay? So now we'll look at the full tune, again, in a reasonable tempo. 1 and 2 And ready, and go. Okay, got the hang of it? Great. It's a cool tune, isn't it? It's a really fun tune to play. Now I'll show you, when I play this tune, I mean, it's such a strong tune, and I associate it so much with my old friend Phil. I don't do too much of what he used to call that shaky stuff. Not too much shaky stuff in this one. Couple of rolls. I'll show you something that I call a punch roll or a punch cran, which is adding the same note again with a little bit of force at the end of the roll. When I'm in the second half, and we're going down that little cascading downward section, where I'm playing the rolls, and I get this little wah sound in a couple of the rolls. What you want to do with ornamentation, it's like compound mathematics. These ornaments are all their own little kingdoms, their own little things, with single grace notes or cuts or triplets and rolls and crayons and, you know, whatever you call them, or you call them in your local area. The name doesn't matter. The movement matters. Okay? And what you want to do, vibrato and glissando are two of the others. And a glissando is your fancy schmancy $25 classical word for what we call a slide. So if I'm going to be playing, let's say, a G roll, and you have a couple rolls going on, what I do is I'll start on an F sharp, and when the F sharp starts, I'm not going to start with my finger pressed down hard, okay? You should never press your fingers down really hard, because before you lift it up, you have to release the pressure before it comes up, and all of a sudden you start very, very, very slowly slowing down. Enough pressure to close the hole. When you bring your finger down, you should hear that. Okay? That means you're putting a positive seal on that hole. No air is going to leak out. So to play these little glissando introductions to the roll, and this is now compound ornamentation. You're going to play a roll But now we're going to add a slide into the beginning of that roll. We're going to put some sleaze in the breeze. As I like to say, that's one of my old Skip's tips. Put some sleaze in the breeze. So there's a slide, F sharp to G roll, slide, G note to A roll. And then some nice crisp notes to follow that up. Okay, there you go. Humors of Ennistimen. There you go. Great old tune I learned from a great old man. Phil Malachny. Thanks, Phil, for all the memories, all the great music. I'm trying to pass them on. I'm trying to shoot them forward for you. Now, one thing, I have to talk about the Skip Healy shirt, which I flashed last time. I hope you can see it across the back. It says, "Go home and practice." And right now, in Connecticut, in America, there very well may be a woman, singer, flute player, ballroom player, and phenomenal visual artist. And I'm going to credit her because this is a critical thing that happened in my life. Her name's Gina Dunlap. And in the 1980s, she was very well known as a solo performer in the New Haven area, and eventually helped form a band called King Cora. I had, there was a three-piece band with a great fiddle player, Joe Gerhardt, a guitarist, singer, Jim Douglas, I believe, and Gina, and a man called Tony Morris, who played about 35 instruments at every gig. They were a great band, great local band, had some great singing, some great tunes. I had a little five-piece band at that time called Finn McCool, and so we were regularly fighting over all the gigs in New Haven, although I have to say King Cora got the majority of the gigs. So I grew up playing the fife, as you all know by now, and I had actually, at this point in my life, I had won the highest competition in the United States for fife playing. I had won the Connecticut Individual Championship, which qualified you to play against all the other regional champions, and then you won what was called the Northeastern Championship, which was the highest level you could get in New England fife playing. I was playing with a group called the Connecticut Blues. I was fortunate enough to win this Connecticut Individual Championship and the Northeastern Individual Championship, and also played in the Fife Quartet from the Blues that also won both awards. So I felt I was a pretty good player at this point. But then I came into traditional Irish music and I had to start all over again. Okay, going from the top level of competitive fife playing in the region of the country that I'm from to absolute ground zero, starting to play on the flute. For all of you guys struggling out there with your low Ds and crappy low Es, it took me at least a year to get a low D out of these flutes after being a championship player. So don't give up, keep going, you'll get there. So when I learned my first half a dozen or so tunes, Silver Spear, Glen Allen, I think Morrison's, you know, some basic session tunes. there was my first opportunity to go to a session at a place called the New Haven Gaelic Football and Hurling Club. And that became basically my home for the next 10 years. In fact, I was living in my car in the parking lot for a little while when my guest from the last podcast realized I was living in my car in the parking lot after a session because my car was full of all my belongings, and he brought me up to his house. And that's a whole bunch of stories for another time. But I came into the session, and there was a big round circle of players. Patty Reynolds, actually the phenomenal old fiddle player from New York City, was at that session. It was kind of an honor. He was the guest musician at the session. He used to come down to the hurling club once a year or so for this big occasion. And there was an open chair next to a flute player, a woman I saw with a flute. So I thought, oh, hey, perfect. Let me sit next to the flute player. Great. So I sat down, and they're playing tunes, and I'm just having a good time listening to the music, and it was my first session, so I'm getting a feel a little bit about what a traditional Irish music session was like, and it was roaring. It was great. A tune comes up that I knew, one of my half a dozen or so tunes. So I pick up my flute and I'm roaring away trying to play this tune. And Gina kind of used to put the flute on her shoulder when she played, and she's had that style of flute playing. And so I played my tune, and I think she was on my right. So I kept kind of getting this in the middle of the tune, and I thought, okay. This is going to lead somewhere, I think. And at the end of the tune, Gina, not in a nasty fashion now, because she was well established in New Haven, as I say. I mean, she was the cat's meow at that time. She looked at me and said, "What do you think you're doing?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm playing a tune on the Irish flute." And she looked at me and said, "Well, you're not. Go home and practice." Honest. She's probably mortified right now. Oh my God, he's telling the story again. And there's a couple of ways to take something like that. As I said, I was pretty established in the music field that I came from. So one reaction could be one that I'm not going to say right now because it would involve words perhaps tender ears should not hear. The other reaction, which I'm very glad I took, was, well, this person feels perfectly comfortable looking at me, telling me to go home and practice, so I'm going to take that advice because I must really be screwing this stuff up. So I went out and I bought every single Irish record I could find, spent the next couple of years with headphones and quite a few ounces of inspiration, shall we say. And then I see the session coming up again. It came up 1 year in between, but I thought, no, I'm not ready for this yet. I'll be ready when I know 100 tunes. When I know 100 tunes, that was my mission. I'm going to learn 100 tunes. And when I can really play 100 tunes on the flute as well as I can play them on the fife, that became kind of my balance point. If I can play it well on the fife, as well on the flute as I can play it on the fife, I'm going to consider that a check mark, a tune learned. So I got my 100 tunes together, and I was starting to do some work in the area, and I was starting to get, pretty good reputation for myself. And I went to the session. And somehow, it was like exactly the same setup as a couple of years ago. All these musicians in a big circle. Patty Reynolds sitting across the room. This flute player whose name I did not know, but I recognized her. And an empty chair, the same empty chair next to her. Okay, here we go. Sat down, and now I'm playing all the tunes in the session. Now I got a good handle on things. Things are going really well. And at one point, this woman turns and she looks at me, big smile, says, God, you're a wonderful flute player. I've never met you. My name's Gina. And she put her hand over. And so I took my hand out and shook it. And I said, well, Gina, my name is Skip. And we actually met exactly here a couple of years ago. And she went from, smiling, from, hi, I'm Gina, to, and she kind of started to release her hand, and I very gently kept her hand a little bit. And I said, and I just want to thank you for giving me some of the best advice anyone ever gave me. I went home and I practiced. Thank you for telling me that. So everybody, if somebody tells you to work on your playing, smile, buy them a pint, buy them a soda, whatever, and go home and practice. Surprising what can happen when you apply yourself to the job at hand. Gina, love you, sweetheart. Thank you very much. Again, some of the best advice I ever got. Everybody else, go home and practice. Thanks. We'll see you next Thursday for the next tune from the shop. And after that, a couple of shows of absolute pure madness with my buddies Olivier and Nico. Until then, everybody, enjoy yourself, enjoy your sessions. Have some fun with your music. Cheers.